Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. And we're here today to talk about the Gears of War 4 multiplayer beta. I've been playing it over the last couple days. I've been able to put in quite a few hours. I think I hit like the 7 or 8 hour mark the other day, actually. And, you know, let's start by saying it's more Gears of War, and I mean that in the best possible way. I mean, I'm somebody who grew up with this franchise. I was that guy pushing everyone's buttons like, go buy Gears of War, go buy Gears of War, pre-order it, man. We're going to play it, we're going to run LAN parties, and we did. I actually hosted LAN events for the original Gears of War on the Xbox 360 in my buddy's basement and my basement. We played it for hundreds and hundreds of hours before we all got our hands on Xbox Live, and then once Xbox Live hit, it was just like, boom, let's go from there. So many amazing memories with the first entry in the franchise, and, you know, things just went forward. Gears of War 2 and Gears of War 3. So I have very clear expectations from what I want Gears of War 4 to do. And a big part of me does want to have it look at its roots and recognize, you know, where it sort of devolved into a much single-layered game. You know, the moment that it stripped away the potential for use of the rifles in the game, you know. So basically I'm talking about the balance of power, or the lack of that balance of power that eventually existed between the Gnasher as well as the Lancer, and, you know, eventually it would be the Retro Lancer and the Hammerburst. But now, as it currently stands in the Gears of War 4, we have just the Lancer and the Hammerburst sitting alongside of the Gnasher. So that's something we're definitely going to talk about. That's something that I feel is very important, and something that Gears of War 4 is on a great path right now. You know, I think it's in a good place. I think that balance of power does exist, and that there is that diversity in combat that is so important to a great multiplayer experience. A lot of people may claim that they want just this ridiculous Gnasher fest, but no one actually wants that. We want diversity in our combat. I want the transition from cover to cover gunfights with the Lancer, with the Hammerburst, to close quarters combat with the shotgun, and back again, the fights for the power weapons. It's all those elements that made Gears of War's multiplayer so great in the first place. You know, when I look back at the original game, it was about those awesome team-based firefights, you know, lancering each other across cover, trying to suppress someone while that guy with the Gnasher flanked to get the kill, or grabbed the sniper or the frag grenades to make that push for something like the boom shot on Mansion, you know. Those are the great moments in Gears history for me, and I had plenty of those moments in Gears 2 and even in Gears 3, you know, despite a lot of the issues that eventually happened with rifle balancing. And I think one of the big things that's holding together the balance of power in Gears 4 right now, because admittedly the Lancer and the Hammerburst are still a bit weak, it's all about stopping power. Stopping power and combining the potential damage of the Lancer and the Hammerburst with active reloads. Really stoked that stopping power is back. I don't know why anyone ever complained about stopping power in the first place, because it is that main key in what maintains that balance of power between using the shotgun in certain situations and using rifles in certain situations. And the thing is, the shotgun should reign supreme in close quarters. I'm not denying that. I don't want to see the Gnasher ever get a debuff. I love that it's so powerful. I love that it actually absolutely chunks people in close quarters. That's just the way it should be. It's righteous. I'm all for that. But equally, if someone isn't using cover, they're trying to rush someone out in the open, they should be punished by rifle users or someone using a rifle for that reason. You know, I hate saying rifle and shotgun users, because at the end of the day, the way to be the best Gears of War player is to have a skill set with all of the different weapons and tools available in Gears of War. You know, if you want to be a great Gears of War player, you need to be effective with the Gnasher. You need to be effective with the rifles, effective with the power weapons. But at the same point, like any good competitive shooter, it's important that players are able to develop their own archetypes. So we're talking about player roles that are designated by the player and the team that those players play on, not by the game developer. You look at a game like Counter-Strike, you know, we've got AWPers. You look at a game like Halo, you've got your Slayers and your Flag Runners, you know, everyone doing their own thing to help their team be successful in the end. It's not about everyone mastering the same role, because that's just silly. It's about people filling in those different roles and being as effective as they can be in those different situations. Gears needs that diversity. You know, it needs that diversity in the players that are playing on the teams, and it needs that diversity in its combat. And I think that Gears 4 is in a really great place. I've really been enjoying my time with the multiplayer beta. It's been wicked satisfying. I've had a lot of those same great firefights and situations that I remember having back in the days of Gears of War 1 and Gears of War 2. You know, awesome Lancer and Hammerburst firefights, which led into amazing shotgun duels. That stuff's fantastic, you know? And again, it's that mixed bag of all of that stuff happening at once, not just one gun, you know, not just a one-gun combat situation all the time. So I'm stoked about that. And just, yeah, really excited to see whether or not the Coalition sticks to their guns on stopping power. You know, it was really sad to see it actually removed at one point from the franchise. Because, you know, I feel what was essentially the vocal minority, but I think it's a really important part of the Gears experience. You know, we need to have a reason to use cover. There needs to be punishment for a lack of use of cover. And that's Gears of War. It's the third-person cover-based shooter. So I want to see that maintained by the Coalition. And I want to see people, rather than complaining about that and just screaming that they want the Nasher to be king, you know, I want people to adapt to that and recognize, guess what? This is Gears of War 4. Get over it. This is the game that the Coalition has built, and this is the game that the community should support because it's the better experience. It's as simple as that, you know? And that's that. That's all I'm going to talk about regarding balance of power and things of that nature. Now, I'm not going to talk about everything in the beta, every little detail, but I want to talk about the stuff that definitely affects gameplay and really how I feel overall about my time with the beta. You know, just straight up, as I said, I love it. It's addictive. It has that same adrenaline pumping, you know, heart racing quality that Gears has always managed to have. Few games do that for me on a multiplayer perspective. I'd say like Counter-Strike and at one point Halo did for me. But nowadays, like, Gears is the only game, man. There's just something about it, you know? I don't know if it's that combination of getting chunked and chunking people with shotguns and headshotting people and, you know, chainsawing people. But there's just something about Gears that has always been exceptionally satisfying and adrenaline pumping for me. Like, it's one of those few games where I hold my breath and my heart is actually racing when it's all said and done, you know? You just constantly feel like you're trying to clutch, like you're trying to hold it together and help your team win. And I think a lot of that has to do with the smaller player count, you know, the really close quarters and, you know, definitely violent and visceral combat. I think that all attributes to that, and it's all very much intact in Gears 4, and I love that. That's, you know, that's wicked exciting. And I think to add to those layers, you know, we have some new execution stuff going on, but what I think the biggest thing for me is the introduction of what they're calling CCC. So it's close cover combat. Now, they've revamped the metal kick. They've made it more fair. It now has a counter. It also requires that you rotary run towards cover in order to initiate it. And they've also added a cover grab, the ability for players to pull one another over cover when sitting on the same cover and then initiate an execution if they time it right with the Y button. Again, this is also counterable. In the past, the mantle kick had no counter. It like locked you into an animation. It sucked, you know, it didn't feel skill-based. It felt like bullshit. I'm sorry, I don't swear often, but it felt like bullshit because it was bullshit. So I'm really happy that this time around, they've introduced those mechanics, which do make combat on cover more exciting, more skill-based. That's the big thing for me, is that skill-based element. It doesn't feel like random BS. You don't feel like you're just caught up in an animation and you can't escape. You can counter it with the button press, you can dodge it, and you can punish someone when they whiff on either the grab or the mantle kick, and I love that. It's definitely just an added layer of awesomeness to the combat that exists in Gears of War. Now, one of the biggest changes that we have to talk about is how the active reload has been modified. So we've got a brand new active reload system. No longer are you just hitting the reload, getting a perfect reload, and getting a damage buff on whatever ammo you've reloaded. You actually now have a little damage buff indicator letting you know when your active reload damage buff is up. It goes up about every 6 seconds, so the cooldown is wicked fast. It's also not a global cooldown, so each weapon has its own active reload cooldown, essentially. What this also means is that you can now reload weapons that are full. So no more dumping an entire, you know, shotgun mag at the start of the match just to active reload it. You can actually active reload a full magazine regardless of the weapon. This to me is super smart because you have to admit that despite how awesome it is to get a damage buff in previous Gears of War games, there was like a sense of randomness. You know, the player was never fully under control of when they could actually get that damage buff off. They had to waste ammunition, or they had to, like, you know, sit around with an empty magazine just to get that damage buff. It felt unnecessary, and I always felt like there was a better way to handle that, but you know, I didn't know how. Luckily, the Coalition does, because they're game developers. So they created this damage buff system. Like I said, it's on a small cooldown, and you have to remember that the damage buff doesn't last forever. So it's all about timing. It's all about knowing when to activate that damage buff, and of course making sure you don't fail to reload. You know, like, okay, I'm gonna get a damage buff on my Nasher and go into combat with it, and then I fail my reload and jam. But that's that sort of risk and reward system that's so great about a manual reload, like the active reload system in Gears of War. And I love what they've done with it. It's a super smart step forward for that system. You know, I didn't ever think that someone would actually modify it or have an idea as to how to change it or make it better, and this is totally it. It's going to be interesting to see once people actually, you know, wrap their head around the mechanic and really understand how much they can get out of their individual weapons with that buff, like the Lancer and the Hammer Burst especially. Like, you know, I'll save up my active reload and I'll initiate it right before I go into combat, and I'll down like a guy in like, you know, half the time it took me with the base damage. It's great for using the Lancer in like a defensive situation. Okay, I'm getting rushed by a shotgunner, you know, but he's obviously out in the open. He's more exposed than I am. You know, let's get that active reload. Let's do the damage and down him right in his tracks and then just take him out. And the same can be said, though, for the shotgun. You know, you're using the Gnasher in a 1v1 Gnasher duel. Grab that damage boost, man. Go to town. Put that guy on the ground and call it a day. So I love that system. Yeah, super smart, man. It really is. You know, it was one of those changes to me that at first I was like, wait, what? What are they doing with it? And then when I wrapped my head around how it works, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is great. This is awesome. It feels like an actual skill, like a power-up essentially for your character now. And to me, that's just an added layer to the combat. I really, really dig that. So let's talk about the maps and the modes that are available in the beta. First and foremost, in terms of modes, we've got Team Deathmatch and Dodgeball. Now, Team Deathmatch it's just Team Deathmatch, you know? I never found TDM to be a really great example of Gears of War's multiplayer. I always looked to like Warzone and Execution, as those were some of the original modes that launched with the base game. TDM came along, you know, eventually, I think, to appease to a more casual audience, and I'm okay with that. I think TDM makes sense for people playing less competitively, people who are playing alone, or people who are new players. But the thing I want to talk about is Dodgeball. I freaking love Dodgeball, and I'm not talking about the game in real life, which is also equally fun, but probably not as fun as giving people in Dodgeball and Gears of War. So Dodgeball to me is sort of like a mode that fits alongside of modes like Warzone and Execution, because it provides that same tension-filled gameplay, because much like Warzone and Execution, it is a one-life mode. Now the twist to Dodgeball is that much like Dodgeball in real life, if you eliminate an enemy, you can bring back one of your own. So if one of your teammates dies, and then you kill one of the enemy, he's going to spawn back in. So it creates this constant battle of attrition, this tug of war between the two teams, which means you can be the last man on your team against 5 people, and you can still bring it back. You know, you don't have to clutch and kill every person on the enemy team. In reality, you only have to kill one player to start that chain, okay? I killed one player, I got one of my guys back. All right, let's make the push, man. Let's do it. That's led to me having matches that last anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. So you got wicked fast matches, and then you got matches that just went back and forth. And I love that. Again, there's those 2 layers. You got the high tension, one life gameplay. On the other side, you've got a game mode that has the opportunity to, you know, basically allow either team to win at any point in time. And it's round-based still, so it's awesome. I really like Dodgeball. It's probably one of the best multiplayer, you know, shooter modes that I've played in a game in a very long time, and I think it fits perfectly into the Gears of War gameplay. I'm really stoked about it, and if they don't announce any new multiplayer modes, at least from a competitive perspective, I'll be fine with Dodgeball. I'll play Dodgeball all day long. There's no doubt it is a more team-based and communication-oriented game mode. I wouldn't really recommend playing it alone. If it's the first thing you're going to do when you boot up the beta, I would go into TDM, get comfortable with the game, you know, refresh your ability to use the shotgun and the different mechanics the game has to offer, and then go into it maybe. But the thing I would really recommend is playing it with a group of players. You know, if you get into a match and there's people who understand what's going on, you'll probably be all right, but playing it with friends is definitely the way to go. You know, constantly coordinating, knowing where everyone is, knowing when someone's about to die, knowing where the enemy is really important to having great success in Dodgeball. And that's definitely part of what makes it such a fun mode, you know, is that team-oriented gameplay that it offers. Okay, so let's talk about the maps. Obviously, no shooter is worth a damn without some good maps. And I have to say, out of the 3 maps available in the beta, Dam is the only one that stands out to me as an instant classic. You know, after the 8 hours that I've spent with it, I don't care much for Harbor. Harbor's kind of so-so in my opinion, but I really, really dig Dam. It's a beautiful map too. It has a lot of scale. You know, you can see the mountains off in the distance. It's probably the most spectacular map in terms of its environmental design. But I do like Foundation. Foundation, from a layout perspective, you know, from a power weapon placement perspective, I think is really good. I really do enjoy it. And that's really kind of the place where Harbor falls short for me, is not just that I don't care about the design, it's just kind of a washed out harbor. It's really dark and gloomy. But the overall layout just doesn't click for me. I think the spawns are too close to the core combat area. Foundation and Dam don't really have that problem. They're two maps that are very well laid out, and I really appreciate the power weapon and the grenade layout on Dam. In fact, the grenade pickup location on Dam, I don't know, it just feels reminiscent of War Machine and the sniper pickup that it had. There's just something about the overall design of the map and the areas surrounding it that remind me a lot of War Machine if it was a slightly more exposed map, and for that reason, I really love it. Now, let's talk visuals. Let's talk about the graphics, because everyone's either freaking out about this or just accepts it. So many people like, this looks worse than Gears of War 3. Why is it so cartoonish? Okay, number one, when was the last time you actually played Gears 3? It doesn't look anything like Gears of War 3. It is a much better looking game than Gears of War 3, and definitely a much better looking game than Judgment. I would even say that it looks better than Ultimate Edition, because Ultimate Edition is still just kind of looking at a lot of the old maps from the original Gears of War. And none of those maps have the same color that the maps in Gears of War 4 have. And again, it's not cartoony, it's just actually colorful. It has color where it should have it. You know, we look at a map like Dam and you've got the green tarps, the very pastel green tarps everywhere. There's just a lot of really nice color. Foundation's got its sort of brick road with the leaves laying all over the place. You can see moss growing up on Dam. You know, Gears of War finally has color in its palette. It's not that it's cartoonish, it just feels alive for once, and I really like that. I think it makes it all that much more satisfying to spill each other's blood on these locations. And I think it's the only step forward for the franchise. Like, you have to get away from the dark and dreary maps at some point. So I'm really, really happy to finally, you know, see some actual color in Gears of War's multiplayer palette. Gears 3 did a very good job, I think. There's no doubt about that, but I think what I'm seeing in 4, I really dig it. There just feels like there's even more colors going on. And they're colors that make sense. It's not like they just started slapping paint all over the place. You know, you've got these nice yellows that I think really symbolize construction environments like we see in the Dam. Even in Harbor, you know, which is a much more dark and dreary map with its weather effects, there are still lots of bits and pieces of color here and there. So I really appreciate what they've done. And from an overall graphics perspective, you know, if you want to start talking about textures and things of that nature, you have to recognize that this is the multiplayer. You also have to recognize this is beta and we're 6 months away from launch. So things are going to change. There's no doubt about that. But when it comes to the multiplayer, they're trying to nail 60 FPS. Right now, there are definitely frame drops in the beta, some substantial ones. Some of the time, it seems like the game is just constantly below 60. And I know that they're really aiming for 60 FPS. Whether they're going to have 60 FPS locked or not, I don't know. But if the beta doesn't get any, like, if the game doesn't look any better when it launches in terms of its multiplayer, I won't be upset. I'll be upset if they don't improve the frame rate more than anything. I want to see like a constant 60 FPS. I'm fine with the visuals right now for the multiplayer. The single player is where they're really going to push the visuals and they're going to go for 30 FPS instead. It's just a smart move. It's something that Halo did with Halo 5 Guardians, and I like it. To me, it just makes sense. It's smart. You know, yes, I want 60 FPS in my multiplayer. I want it to be as silky and beautifully smooth as it possibly can be. And if that means a small loss in graphical fidelity, I'm okay with that, considering I still think the game looks damn good. So that's it, guys. At the end of the day, I'm hooked, you know? To me, this does feel very much like a return to form for Gears multiplayer. I think it's looking back at its history, it's recognizing where it fell short, where the series sort of devolved, and it's trying to improve on those elements. And yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah, man. You know, I was looking forward to the campaign regardless. I love my story in Gears, and come on, it's Marcus Phoenix's son. How can I not play it? You know, and I'm hoping that they'll kill it with that. I'm hoping that they'll kill it with the gameplay. I've always enjoyed the campaigns in Gears games. Even in Judgment, I thought Judgment had a phenomenal campaign. The multiplayer just really didn't know what the hell it was. So I'm happy to at least get a taste of the multiplayer for Gears 4 and know that it feels good. And it's all about them just holding it together, looking at the beta, making improvements, and really pulling it together for launch. And I think that, you know, Coalition is the team that can do that. And I'm really excited for the future of the franchise. I'm really excited to play the full release come later this year. And that is that. I'm going to be playing a lot more of the beta over the coming days. A lot more. And if you guys have any questions or thoughts regarding the beta, anything that I didn't talk about in the video, feel free to throw it down in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next one.